For more than 13 centuries, Ripon Cathedral has stood through the shifting tides of English history. Invasion, rebuilding, kings and kingdoms, and the long passage of centuries. But the most visible wounds inside these walls were not carved in the Middle Ages, they were made by English hands. In the 1640s, during the English Civil War, this cathedral, like many others, became a battlefield of belief, not of cannon and cavalry, but of ideology. Ripon Cathedral stood long before the 17th century fractured England. Its foundations reach back to the 7th century, when St. Wilfrid established a church here in the Anglo-Saxon kingdom of Northumbria. Through Viking raids, Norman reconstruction, medieval expansion and Reformation, the cathedral endured. Yet it was during the English Civil War between 1642 and 1651 that some of the most visible damage within these walls was inflicted. Not by foreign invaders, but by English soldiers acting in the name of reform and religious purity. The conflict between King Charles I and Parliament was not simply a struggle over taxation or authority, it was also a battle over the soul of the English Church. Charles believed deeply in the divine right of kings and upheld a ceremonial, esopical structure of worship that many of his opponents regarded as dangerously close to Catholicism. To many parliamentarians, especially the Puritans, cathedrals like this were not sacred spaces. They were symbols of corruption, of ceremony, of what they saw as popish excess. Their boots walked where bishops once processed, and what they saw around them, stained glass saints, carved angels, monuments of civic pride, was in their eyes adultery. Much of the original medieval stained glass at Ripon was destroyed during this period, and today the windows you see are largely later restorations. To the iconoclast, stained glass depicting saints or biblical figures was not an aid to devotion, it was a distraction at best, and at worst, a violation of scripture. So glass was smashed, faces shattered, biblical narratives reduced to fragments of colour scattered across cold flagstones. Among the damaged monuments inside Ripon Cathedral are memorials connected to one of the most powerful families in this part of medieval Yorkshire, the Markenfield family. The knight whose effigy lies here bears the distinctive Heldrick mark of that family, linking him to the lineage that once held lands across the region from their nearby seat at Markenfield Hall. He was carved centuries ago. The monument would originally have shown the knight complete, resting in his armour beneath the protection of the church, a permanent reminder of his family's status and memory. But today that figure is broken and smashed. His face is damaged, his arms that once completed the effigy have been smashed away, scars left during the iconoclastic destruction that swept through English churches in the 17th century. Beside him lies a second monument, almost certainly his wife. Her effigy has suffered far greater violence. The upper body has been completely destroyed, leaving only the lower part of the carving behind. Attackers frequently struck the most human parts of a sculpture: the face, the head, the torso, and even the eyes, the areas that made the figure appear alive. Once those were destroyed, the identity of the monument was effectively erased. When the effigy was later repaired, the surviving fragments were reassembled imperfectly. The feet were placed back incorrectly, a small but haunting detail that still hints at the force of the original destruction. History, comments and rumours, when these were restored, the feet were placed on intentionally as part of that destruction. At least one of these monuments originally stood outside the cathedral before later restorations brought it indoors for protection. Together, these monuments trace a family lineage carved in stone, ancestors, their descendants, husband and wife lying side by side beneath the cathedral walls, but the damage inflicted centuries later is still visible. The knight and his wife were carved to lie here together in peace, forever. Yet even in death, the violence of the 17th century reached them. One of the best authentic historic sources we have comes from the diary of William Dowsing, a Puritan officer who was tasked with destroying what Parliament considered superstitious images in churches during the English Civil War. His entries are blunt and chilling because they read like routine work orders. We break down about 100 superstitious pictures and a crucifix. We break down 20 superstitious pictures and the steps of the altar. Perhaps the most striking evidence of Civil War damage within Ripon Cathedral is the monument of Hugh Ripley, who died in 1637, was the last wakeman of Ripon and its first mayor. A figure of civic importance, whose memorial was erected shortly before the country descended into war. His monument would originally have stood intact, a proud representation of status and remembrance carved in stone. During the Civil War occupation, however, the monument was attacked. It suffered significant defacement, severe enough that restoration was required in 1730. It's difficult for us now, standing centuries later, to imagine that such destruction could be justified in the minds of those who carried it out. Yet for many Parliamentarian soldiers and their supporters, this was an act of purification. They believed they were restoring worship to simplicity, removing what they saw as human additions to divine truth. And in that conviction, they found moral clarity, even as they damaged irreplaceable medieval craftsmanship. Figures such as Oliver Cromwell would later come to symbolise this period of radical change, though the iconoclasm was not solely his doing. It emerged from a broader movement within the sections of Parliamentarian England, where suspicion of episodical authority and elaborate worship had been intensifying for decades. The Civil War merely removed the restraints that had previously held such resentment in check. History is rarely gentle. The past is not simply knights, monks, and kings. It's also anger, fear, conviction, and reform. It's in these moments when a nation looks at its own inheritance and decides that parts of it must be broken in order to move forward. Ripon Cathedral therefore tells two intertwined stories. One is the long arc of medieval faith and craftsmanship. The other is the story of internal conflict, of how belief, when sharpened by war, can turn against beauty in the name of righteousness. The scars remain not as spectacles of destruction, but as evidence of how deeply people once cared about the shape of their worship and the authority under which they lived. Despite the violence done in the name of reform, the stone still stands, light still falls across the floor, voices still rise in song. The damage has not erased the building, it's simply become part of its story. In that sense, Ripon Cathedral is not only a monument to faith, it's a monument to survival, to the idea that even when belief divides a nation, what is built with patience and skill can outlast the fury of its own age.